legislative elections took place on 10 and 17 June 2012 to select the members of the 14th National Assembly of the French Fifth Republic a little over a month after the French presidential election runoff held on May 6. All 577 single-member seats in the Assembly, including those representing overseas departments and territories and French residents overseas, were contested using a two-round system. Background. Presidential election The elections come a month after the presidential election won by Front Section Holland of the Socialist Party. Since 2002, legislative elections immediately follow the presidential ones. This was designed to limit the possibility of a cohabitation, whereby the president and his or her prime minister, backed by a parliamentary majority, would be of opposite parties. The aim was also to give the new president and his government a double mandate, the election of the president being followed by that of a parliamentary majority enabling him to implement his policies. This is what happened in 2002 and 2007. Thus, in 2012, the Socialist Party has asked French citizens to confirm the result of a presidential election. Holland's campaign director Pierre Moscovici argued it would not make sense to have elected a president only for him to be rendered powerless by the legislative election. This president tomorrow must have a majority with which to govern. By contrast, the Union for a Popular Movement, on the right, has repeatedly asked that the left not be given all the powers through this election. The legislative elections in France are often described as the third round of the presidential election. Ethnic and gender pluralism in order to make possible the election of some candidates of non-European ethnic background as well as for female candidates, the Socialist Party had, like in 2007, reserved several constituencies for them, 22 for ethnic minorities and 49% for women. At the end of the second round, there were 13 metropolitan deputies with non-European ethnic background, including 2 government members who will be replaced by their alternate candidates, 6 with Algerian roots, Kader Arif, Kara Boutziane, Pascal Cherki, Jean Front Section Copa Copyright, Razi Hamadi, Chanis Kairani, 2 with Lebanese roots, Christian Asaf, Omri Jibrail, 2 with Gabalopian roots, Ha Copyright Lani Jeffroy, George Paul Angevin, 1 with Tunisian roots, Pierre Lelouch, 1 with Chadian roots, Sabah Dagama, 1 with Brazilian roots, Eduardo Ryan Seep. Among the 11 deputies who represent French citizens abroad, 1 is from Ra Copyright Union, Coron Narasiguin, another has Chilean roots, Sergio Coronado, and a third one has Iranian roots, Pouria Amir Shorhi. Electoral system. A total of 6,603 candidates ran for the 577 seats, an average of 11 per constituency. Some 40% are women. The law mandates that every party must have between 49 and 51% of women among its candidates, or have their public funding significantly reduced. Some parties, among the richest, prefer to pay the fine rather than comply with this rule, according to Libre Copyright Ration. The law also does not take electability into account, and significant numbers of women candidates run in constituencies where their party does not stand a real chance. French expatriates elected their own MPs for the first time voting early, from 23 to May 26 or on 2nd or 3rd June for the first round and from 6 to June 12 or on 16th or 17th June for the second, depending on their location and the method by which they cast their ballot. If an expatriate votes via the Internet, he or she has a week to do so from 23 to May 26. A postal ballot may be cast, if received by May 31 in the Americas or by June 1 in the rest of the world. Those who prefer to vote in person in their local consulate must do so on June 2 in the Americas or June 3 in the rest of the world. The two-round system each of the 577 constituencies elects one representative to the National Assembly, in a two-round election. A candidate is elected in the first round if he or she obtains an absolute majority of the vote in his or her constituency and the votes of at least 1/4 of all registered voters in the constituency. If a large number of voters abstain, an absolute majority of the vote may thus not be enough, although this rarely happens if no candidate is elected in the first round. Then the two candidates who finished first and second in the first round advance automatically to the second for a runoff. They may be joined by the third or even fourth-placed candidate. The second round is open to any candidate who has obtained the votes of at least 12.5% of registered voters in the constituency. Low turnouts therefore decrease the likelihood of a three-person runoff. In the second round, the candidate who obtains the most votes is elected. An absolute majority is not required. Candidates who advance to the second round have the option of withdrawing. Usually this happens in a triangulaire, where the party and/or candidate that finished third in the first round prefers to favor one of the two leading candidates. In the 2012 election, for example, third-placed UMP candidate Roland Carsane in the Bouches-du-Rhône's 16th constituency withdrew in order to help the National Front candidate defeat the Socialist candidate. In addition, the parties of the mainstream left have a long-standing agreement whereby they do not stand against one another in the second round. If two of them advance to the second round in the same constituency, the less well-placed of the two automatically withdraws. In some cases, this means a triangulaire is avoided, and the left is united against a single right-wing candidate. In the 2012 election, for example, in the Hauts-de-Seine's 11th constituency, incumbent MP and Left Front candidate Marie Harcopy-Amiable narrowly finished second behind Socialist candidate Julie Sommaruga. Amiable withdrew, supporting Sommaruga in her runoff against New Centre candidate Jean-Luc Mélenchon, who had finished third in the first round with enough support to advance to the second. In other cases, this rule means that only one candidate remains in the second round. Thus, Socialist Nadia Amtsel withdrew in favor of Left Front candidate and incumbent MP Marie-George Buffet in Seine-Saint-Denis 4th constituency. Left Front candidate Patrick Lahiaric withdrew in favor of Socialist candidate Perme Elizabeth Guiga in Seine-Saint-Denis 6th constituency. Left Front candidate and incumbent MP Pierre Gosnot withdrew in favor of Citizen and Republican Movement candidate Jean-Luc Laurent in the Val-de-Marne's 10th constituency. And Green candidate Star Copyright Fane Gatagnon withdrew in front of the Left Front's incumbent MP Frana Section Sensi in Seine-Saint-Denis 4th constituency. In all these cases, no candidate of the right, centre or far right had reached the second round, meaning that the best-placed and sole remaining left-wing candidate was guaranteed to be elected in a one-person runoff. Redistricting. The Constitutional Council approved in 2010 the first redistricting of electoral boundaries since 1986 to reflect France's changing demographics. The population ratio between the most populated and least populated constituencies was reduced from 1.3.6 to 1.2. A study by Regards Citoyens indicated that the number of seats increased in areas held by the centre-right coalition led by then-governing UMP at the expense of the socialist-led opposition coalition. Officially, the dual purpose of the redistricting was to ensure a more equal number of voters per constituency, but also to provide seats in the National Assembly to French citizens resident overseas. 33 constituencies were abolished, and 33 new ones created. Of the latter, 19 were in France, while the rest of the world was divided into 11 constituencies for French residents overseas. Parties. Main parties and their aims. The Socialist Party aims to obtain the parliamentary majority with which to implement its policies. If the left wins overall, there are three possibilities: the Socialist Party has an absolute majority of seats, and can govern alone, without having to rely on the support of smaller left-wing or centre-left parties. The Socialist Party has a majority with the support of its government partners, Europe Ecology the Greens, the Radical Party of the Left, and the small Citizen and Republican Movement. The Socialist Party and its aforementioned partners lack a majority alone, and require the support of the Left Front in order to govern. The Left Front has indicated that it will never bring down the socialist government, but that it will not systematically support the government's policies, and will require support for some of its own policy proposals. The Union for a Popular Movement officially aims to win the election. Its primary stated aim, however, is to obtain enough seats to prevent the left from having the 3/5 ths Congress majority which would enable it to adopt constitutional reforms. The UMP's task is complicated by the popularity of the far-right National Front, which the polls indicate could obtain enough support to reach the second round in a large number of constituencies, thus splitting the right-wing vote. The Left Front aims to have a sizable group in Parliament, with which to have meaningful influence on the policies of the socialist government. The National Front aims to obtain seats in the Assembly. It has none prior to the election. A secondary aim is to sow chaos in the UMP by maintaining candidates in the second round and thus causing the UMP potentially to lose seats. The National Front's stated aim is eventually to replace the UMP as the main party of the right, though opinion polls credit the UMP with at least 209 seats, and the National Front with 8 at most, possibly none at all. Europe Ecology the Greens aims to form an official parliamentary group, which requires having 15 members in the Assembly. Electoral alliances with the Socialist Party are likely to significantly increase the number of Greens in Parliament. The Democratic Movement aims to preserve its 3 seats, although its earlier ambitions were much higher. Opinion polls suggest the party may disappear from the Assembly completely, and is unlikely to obtain any additional seats. In all, 12 parties or alliances are standing more than 100 candidates. The Socialist Party has 459 candidates, and is endorsing candidates of allied parties in other constituencies. The UMP has 501 candidates, and is endorsing candidates of allied parties in 69 other constituencies. The Left Front has 531 candidates. Europe Ecology the Greens has 465. Marine Le Pen's Marine Blue Gathering has 571 candidates, and is thus present in all but 6 constituencies. Most of these candidates are members of the National Front. Others are from small, allied extreme right parties. Front Section Bayrou Centre for France Alliance has 340 candidates, most of whom are members of the Democratic Movement. Also standing over 100 candidates are, Workers' Struggle, 536, the New Anti-Capitalist Party, 329, the Independent Ecological Alliance, 292, Arise the Republic, 253, an Alliance of the Clover, the New Ecologists and the Humans, Animals, Nature Movement, 132, the Independent Workers' Party, 103, Pirate Party, 101. UMP position on the National Front equals, with the prospect of National Front candidates reaching the second round alongside the mainstream candidates of the left and right in a number of constituencies, the Socialist Party announced that it would withdraw its candidate from the second round in those constituencies, if and only if it appeared that the National Front candidate had a realistic prospect of winning. In such cases, the Socialists would support the UMP candidate as part of a Republican front against the far right. The UMP, by contrast, refrained from saying it would withdraw and support a socialist candidate in those same circumstances. Instead, 64% of UMP voters said they would favor an alliance between their own party and the extreme right for the legislative election. Leading figures of the UMP rejected the possibility. Chantal Giorno said she was worried it might be under consideration, leading party leader Jean Front Section Copa Copyright to assure her publicly there will never be an alliance with the National Front. 2 days before the first round, Alain Juppé Copyright called upon party members to resist the temptation of local alliances with the far right, arguing on moral, pragmatic, and tactical grounds, highlighting ideological and policy incompatibility and the National Front's stated aim to break and replace the UMP. The day after the first round, the UMP officially announced its position. The party told its candidates not to withdraw if they had entered the second round in third place behind a socialist candidate and a candidate of the National Front. In addition, in constituencies where the second round was a runoff between the left and the National Front, the UMP would not support either candidate. Roland Carsane, UMP candidate in the Bouches-du-Rhône's 16th constituency, immediately disobeyed the party line, announcing he was withdrawing from the second round and supporting the National Front candidate. he explained that he considered himself closer to Marine Le Pen than to the Socialist Party. In the Gard's second constituency, third-placed UMP candidate Etienne Mourad also publicly considered defying party instructions and withdrawing in favor of National Front candidate Gilbert Collard. Ultimately, he decided to comply with party instructions and remain in the race. Simultaneously, Nadine Morano, government minister from 2008 and 2012, asked National Front voters in her constituency to support her on the grounds of the shared values between the right and the far right, while UMP Mayor of Nice Christian Estrosi stated that the UMP has no common values with the Socialist Party. On June 12, Morano published an interview in the far-right newspaper Minute, calling for as large a gathering as possible of the right. Another UMP candidate, Jean-Paul Garaud, stated that his party and the National Front had common beliefs, a statement which was criticized by Alain Juppé copyright as being in total contradiction with the stated position of the UMP. Martine Aubry, the leader of the Socialist Party, said that her party, by contrast, would support candidates of the right against the far right, as a Republican principle. In Vaucluse's third constituency, she therefore asked Socialist candidate Catherine Arkalovich, who had entered the second round in third place, to withdraw and support second-placed UMP candidate Jean-Michel Ferrand, so as to help defeat National Front candidate Marion Maréchal Le Pen. Arkalovich, however, defied her party and refused to withdraw. Pierre Moscovici, Socialist Minister of Finance, stated on June 12 that the UMP had lost its way and its values and no longer knew what it stood for, in response to its position on the National Front. Later that same day, Prime Minister Jean-Marc Ayrault accused the UMP of preparing a strategic alliance with the National Front, adding, "I think it was underway with Nicolas Sarkozy, but now the UMP really is at a turning point." Campaign. The official campaign began, in metropolitan France, on May 21. In every constituency, each candidate has a billboard outside every polling station, upon which to display a campaign poster. Campaign material is also distributed by candidate supporters in the streets and in letter boxes, and many campaign posters are illegally displayed in the streets. Transmitting campaign material to voters by email is, however, prohibited. Nationwide, parties represented in the National Assembly prior to the election have the right to broadcast campaign clips on television. An hour and a half is provided for the outgoing parliamentary majority, and an hour and a half for the outgoing opposition. Each side distributes this time as it sees fit between its constituent parties. Parties which are not represented in Parliament but which are standing at least 75 candidates are entitled to 7 minutes of broadcast each. Any campaigning whatsoever is forbidden on the eve of the election. The leaflets of the candidates for the French nationals abroad seats were published online on the website of the Foreign Affairs Ministry. Opinion polls. Results. Overall, the election was won by the left, providing the new government with an absolute parliamentary majority. The parties of the presidential majority together have 55.97% of seats. With the left front providing them with supply and confidence, they have 57.70%. Among the 577 members of the Assembly, 234 were new. A record number of women were elected, 155. Turnout was 57.23%, a record low. Wallis and Futuna's single constituency had the highest turnout of any French electorate during the first round on June 10, with 78% voter participation. Overall results by party. The Socialist Party obtained 300 seats, an absolute majority. Favored by electoral alliances with the Socialist Party, its close allies, the Radical Party of the Left and the Citizen and Republican Movement, obtained respectively 13 and 2 seats, for a total of 315. This meant that the Socialists could govern without having to rely on the support of other left-wing parties the Greens, or the Left Front. Europe Ecology the Greens, part of the government and of the presidential majority, also benefited from an electoral alliance with the Socialists, increasing its number of seats from just 4 to 18. This enables the Greens to form an official parliamentary group. They become the third biggest party in the Assembly. The Left Front, which decided to stand alone after electoral alliance negotiations with the Socialists broke down, lost half its seats, despite a substantial increase in the number of votes it's received. It no longer has enough seats to be recognized as a parliamentary group on its own, but formed a group with 5 miscellaneous left representatives from French overseas departments and territories: Huguette Bello, Alfred Marie-Jean and Jean-Philippe Niler, Gabriel Serville, and Bruno Nestor as a copyright rot. The Union for a Popular Movement, now the main opposition party, lost 112 seats, and several of its prominent members were defeated. In particular, 20 of the 41 members of the popular right faction of the party standing for re-election lost their seats, most notably, Éric Raoult and Maryse Joissains-Massini. Immediately after the defeat, leading members of the party called for a rethink of its positioning and a reassertion of its values. Alain Juppé copyright stated that the UMP should stand clear on its incompatibility with the National Front. Front-Section Baroin and Jean-Pierre Raffarin expressed the same view, adding that the UMP's strong drift to the right, and increasing proximity with the ideas of the far right had been a mistake. Party leader Jean Front-Section Copa copyright, however, replied that he disagreed with these views. The Democratic Movement lost its leader, Front-Section Bayrou, beaten in his own constituency by his socialist challenger. The party's membership in the Assembly fell from 3 to 2, Jean Lassalle and Thierry Robert. Bayrou's defeat was seen as a potentially crippling blow not just for his own career, but for the party which he had founded, and for the centre in French politics more generally. All the more so as the two centre-right parties, the New Centre and the Radical Party, both lost seats, despite an electoral alliance with the UMP. The New Centre's representation in the Assembly fell from 25 members to 14, meaning that it would no longer be recognised as a parliamentary group in itself. The Radical Party obtained just 9 seats. The far right obtained representatives in the Assembly for the first time since the 1997 election. Party leaders Marine Le Pen and Louis Alliot were defeated, as was party spokesman Florian Philippot, but Le Pen's 22-year-old niece Marion Mara copyright Charles Le Pen was elected in Carpentras, benefiting from a split opposition due to socialist candidate Catherine Arkalovic's refusal, in defiance of party instructions, to withdraw in support of the better-placed UMP candidate. Marine Le Pen's lawyer Gilbert Collard, who is not a member of the National Front but was endorsed by it, was also elected, giving the party 2 seats. In addition, a former member of the National Front and Movement for France, and now independent far-right politician, Jacques Bompard, was elected in a constituency neighbouring Mara copyright Charles Le Pen's, in the Vaucluse. In overseas departments and territories, several local parties gained or maintained representation. The Guyanese Socialist Party won a seat, returning to the Assembly for the first time since 1993. Its MP, Gabriel Serville, was initially to sit with the Socialists, before opting to sit with the Left Front. This was widely seen as a goodwill gesture by the Socialist Party, meant to enable the Left Front to pass the 15-member threshold required to form a parliamentary caucus of their own. The Martinican independence movement obtained 2 seats. Boy Ali said, leader of the miscellaneous left movement against the high cost of living, won one of the 2 available seats in Mayotte. In New Caledonia, both seats were won by the centre-right, Anti-Independence Caledonia Together Party, which gained them from the UMP. In French Polynesia, the conservative, pro-autonomy but anti-independence Tohorea Huira-Atira won all 3 seats. The far-left parties, as well as the Pirate Party and the small environmentalist parties, failed to reach the second round in any constituency. Gains and losses based on notional party affiliation on dissolution after redistricting, regardless of party affiliation on previous election. Based on notional distribution of seats before dissolution and after the 2010 redistricting, 149 seats switched party. 8 seats switched from the left to the right, 9 from the extreme left to the left, 119 from the right to the left, 3 from the right to the extreme right, 3 from the right to the extreme left, 2 from Modem to the left, 1 from the right to Modem. 4 seats switched party within the left as a result of coalition agreements. Notable individual results Government ministers. It is not compulsory in France for a government minister to obtain an electoral mandate, but ministers usually do seek the legitimacy it implies. As no person may simultaneously be a member of the executive and the legislature, any government minister elected to parliament must immediately resign from their newly obtained seat in the assembly, in order to remain a minister. Their running mate then takes their seat, and holds it until and unless they cease to be a minister, whereupon they revert to being a member of the assembly. Prior to the 2012 election, new Prime Minister Jean-Marc Ayrault ruled that any minister who stood in the election and was beaten would have to resign from government. 2 ministers, Najat Vallaud-Belkacem and Christiane Taubira, opted to withdraw their candidacies in their respective constituencies. 25 ministers did decide to stand, while the remaining 8 had never expressed an intention to do so. All government ministers standing as candidates were elected or re-elected, and were thus able to remain in government. Specifically, they fared as follows. Other notable national political figures fared as follows: elected or re-elected, beaten. Notable races. These constituencies attracted particular media interest, due to the presence of a notable candidate facing, for example, unexpected difficulties, or on the contrary an unexpectedly easy race, or due to the prospect of a significant and meaningful change in fortune for a party. Libre Copyright Ration published a list of 25 constituencies to watch out for, with commentaries. France 24 identified 11 constituencies to watch out for. Pas-de-Calais 11th For the first time, 2 major candidates from the presidential election are standing in the same constituency for the legislative election. Jean-Luc Mélenchon Copyright Lenchen and Marine Le Pen are both standing in the Pas-de-Calais 11th constituency, centered on the town of Ha Copyright Nin Beaumont. The incumbent MP, Odette Juries of the Socialist Party, is not standing for re-election. The socialist candidate is Philippe Kamel. The Le Pen-Mélenchon Copyright Lenchen duel attracted international media attention, including for what it revealed of attitudes and expectations in an area of northern France hit hard by deindustrialization and unemployment. The Guardian noted that, in that regard, Mélenchon Copyright Lenchen blames what he sees as pernicious free market capitalism and bankers. Le Pen points the finger at immigrants and Europe. On the first round, Le Pen won a plurality of the vote. The left-wing vote was split, with the socialist candidate Philippe Kamel receiving more votes than Mélenchon Copyright Lenchen. All 3 candidates qualified for the runoff, but Mélenchon Copyright Lenchen withdrew and supported Kamel for the second round. Kamel narrowly won the seat with 50.1% of the vote, defeating Marine Le Pen. Pire Copyright Na Copyrightes Atlantiques second Attention was also drawn to the Pire Copyright Na Copyrightes Atlantiques second constituency, where presidential candidate Front Section Bayrou of the centrist democratic movement was hoping to retain his seat. Bayrou has held the seat continuously since 1988, but the press raised the possibility that he might this time be beaten. Until 2002, the mainstream right had not stood a candidate against him, and in 2007 the candidate of the Union for a Popular Movement had withdrawn in his favor in the second round. Following Bayrou's personal endorsement of Front Section Holland for the second round of the 2012 presidential election, however, the UMP maintained a candidate against him. He also had to contend with a socialist opponent, despite there having been talk in the Socialist Party of not standing a candidate in his constituency, as a gesture of acknowledgement for his endorsement of Holland. Bayrou was defeated, with the seat going to socialist candidate Nathalie Chaban. Charente-Maritime first In Charente-Maritime's first constituency, no candidate of the right, centre or far right reached a second round. The second round was between Czar Copyright Golany Royal, the Socialist Party's candidate to the 2007 presidential election, and a dissident socialist, Olivier Falouny. Falouny won the seat, defeating Royal by a comfortable margin. Paris fourth In well-off Paris' 4th constituency, the opposite situation arose. The two candidates qualified for the second round were both from the right, Bernard Debré, copyright for the UMP, and Brigitte Custer, a UMP dissident. Immediately after the first round, however, Custer withdrew. There was a second round nonetheless, but with only one candidate, who needed simply to receive one vote in order to be elected. This configuration also happened in several constituencies on the left. Hauts-de-Seine 9th the Hauts-de-Seine's 9th constituency, traditionally a very safe seat for the right, raised unexpected difficulties for UMP candidate and former Minister of the Interior Claude Guay, copyright aunt. A dissident member of the UMP, Thierry Solé, contested his legitimacy, stood against him, and reached the second round, precipitating a three-way runoff between two candidates of the right and one of the left. Solé narrowly won the seat, obtaining votes from the left given Guayant's impopularity on that side. The total share of the vote for left-wing candidates was 28%, in the first round, plus 4% for the Modem candidate. Meurthe-Moselle 5th this constituency drew attention due to the behavior and situation of UMP candidate Nadine Morano, who had been Minister for Professional Training in Front-Section Fillon's government from 2010 to 2012. She finished second in the first round behind socialist candidate Dominique Potier and, in the hopes of obtaining more votes in the second, appealed explicitly to the voters of the eliminated National Front, on the grounds of common values in what she called a duel between the right and the left. She defined her common values with far-right voters as including control over immigration, refusing to give foreigners the right to vote, and the protection of our borders. After she had published an appeal in a far-right newspaper, Prime Minister Jean-Marc Ayrault and the leader of the Greens and Minister for Housing copyright Gilles Duflot both described her behavior as symptomatic of a worrying shift of part of the right towards the extreme right. Ayrault accused her of renouncing her party's values to try and save her seat. Her situation made headlines again when humorist copyright Roald Dahan phoned her, pretending to be National Front Vice President Louis Elliott, and recorded her expressing her sympathy and closeness to the National Front. Front-Section Fillon publicly rebuked her for not having immediately hung up, saying, "We don't talk to the leaders of the National Front. We must reject all forms of extremism." Morano hit back, telling him she was a free politician. Morano, the incumbent, lost her seat to socialist candidate Dominique Potier by a 10% margin. Bouches du Rhône 5th Marie-Arlette Carlotti, junior minister for the disabled, stood in this constituency against the UMP incumbent Renaud Muselier, who had held the seat since 1993. On paper, media reported that, of all the 26 ministers standing in the legislative elections, she seemed the least likely to win her constituency. Had she lost, she would have had to resign from the government. She was elected with 51.8%, a result which was also described as having a significant impact on local politics in Marseille. As minister, she will not be able to sit in parliament. As long as she stays on the government, her seat goes to her running mate, Arvia Souli, locally famous as a former radio football presenter. S on 8th in addition to Marine Le Pen, Jean-Luc Mar copyright Lenchen and Front-Section Bayrou, three candidates from the presidential election were standing in this legislative election. Nicolas Dupont-Aignan finished first in the first round in Esson's 8th constituency, with 42.82% of the vote, heading into a runoff with socialist candidate Aude Bristot, and eliminating UMP candidate Laurent Barre copyright Isle. In the Giron's 5th constituency, Philippe Poutou finished 8th and was thus eliminated in the first round, receiving just 2.12% of the vote. In Seine-Saint-Denis 6th constituency, Nathalie Arthaud finished 6th with 2.47%, far behind the socialist incumbent and former Minister for Social Affairs at Perm Elizabeth Guiga and the Director of l'Humanité Copyright, Patrick Le Hiaric, standing for the Left Front. Notes and references. External links, French, official results, French, breakdown of full results, Liberation, French, opinion poll tracker with data.